Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories of everyday people and their families. I endeavour to continue publishing episodes ad-free. In order to do so, I would love your support by reviewing my podcast or consider becoming a subscriber for only the cost of a coffee a month. This gives you early access to episodes and also access to bonus episodes, of which at this stage there's over 30. Welcome to the first of my shorts episodes. I found that I had quite a number of stories to tell, but they were quite short. However, I found them to be interesting, and I hope that you find them interesting as well. So these are generally around 15 to 20 minutes per episode. Shorts episode number 6, Robert Cowley. I was interested in Robert Cowley first with his link to a local family I was doing research into. He also featured in a locally published book called Deniliquin and District Pioneers, in which his great-great-niece completed a story on him. This episode tells Robert Cowley's story. Robert Henry Cowley was born on the 6th of January 1839 in Lezayre on the Isle of Man. He was the second son of 12 children born to Philip Cowley, a timber and grocer merchant, and Jane Webster. Philip Cowley died at the age of only 43. Of the 12 children, 10 survived infancy, and 4 sons came to Australia. 2 brothers went to America, and the daughters lived in England, 2 of them running their own business. Robert left Liverpool, England on the ship Altonia on the 7th of February 1855 and arrived at Port Phillip, Melbourne, on the 16th of May, aged only 16. His older brother, John Webster Cowley, had arrived 1 year earlier, and he was a carrier at Skipton and in the Geelong area in around 1863, and it's possible that Robert partnered up with him and they worked the goldfields. Robert married Jane Ferguson in 1873 when he was 34 and Jane 29 at Ballarat. Jane was from a pioneering farming family at Learmonth, just out of Ballarat. Robert stated his occupation as a carrier on his marriage certificate. Their first 2 children, Jane Webster Cowley, was born in Ballarat in 1874, and Rosaline Maggie Cowley was born in 1875, also in Ballarat. Robert Cowley came to Deniliquin, New South Wales, and established the Carriers Arms Hotel in 1877. The licence was granted on the 24th of March. There were several Carriers Arms pubs in Deniliquin's early history, but the likelihood is that Robert's hotel was in North Deniliquin on Davidson Street. This is where he had a home, and this hotel was later known as Hancock's, which does have a connection to Robert. Robert held the licence until 1880. 7 months after gaining his publican's licence, Jane was seriously burned and died a fortnight later on the 21st of November 1877 at the age of only 23. The Deniliquin Pastoral Times announced her death in the paper on the 10th of November 1877, titled A Sad Accident. We are sorry to record a sad accident that occurred between 1 and 2 o'clock on Wednesday to Mrs. Cowley, the wife of a respectable publican of this town. She was walking with her husband and when near the Bank of New South Wales, trod upon a lucifer match which ignited and set fire to Mrs. Cowley's dress, which being of a light texture at once blazed up into flame, and before Mr. Cowley could succeed in extinguishing the fire, which he made prompt efforts to do so, we regret to say that Mrs. Cowley was very seriously burnt. We have to express our regret for committing an unintentional error on Wednesday by stating that the accident was caused by Mr. Cowley throwing a lighted match upon the ground after lighting his pipe. We have since been informed that the accident was caused in the manner described above. And 2 weeks later, a sad case. It is with feelings of deep regret and with sincere sympathy for those bereaved that we record the death of the unfortunate lady who was so severely burnt, as it is supposed, by treading on a match whilst walking in Cressy Street a little time ago. Mrs. Cowley was very young and in the springtime of the joys of her life, and according to all human calculations, must have expected to live for many years, as a solace to her husband and an affectionate mother to her little ones. But so unforeseen a little thing as walking over a match has nipped in the bud all the joys of this young household and has numbered the brightest life with the dead. We feel sure that all in this neighbourhood and many outside of it will join in the sorrow that has fallen so heavily on Mr. Cowley and deprived him of the light of his eyes and the brightness of his home. The deceased lady was buried on Thursday afternoon, a large number being present at the funeral. An inquest was held in the forenoon when the evidence given was a repeat of the facts already published. The jury returned the following verdict. that the deceased was accidentally burnt whilst walking in the town of South Deniliquin and that she died from exhaustion resulting from the injuries she received, but there was no evidence to show how or by what means the fire originated. And what was more so devastating was that their third child, Marion Ferguson Cowley, was born only 4 days before Jane died. And unfortunately, little Marion lived for 10 days, dying on the 28th of November 1877. On the 17th of November 1877, in the Pastoral Times, it announced the birth of Marion, saying at North Deniliquin on the 17th, the wife of R.H. Cowley of a daughter, both doing well. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be for either mother or child. 16 months later, Robert married Jane's sister, Marion. The marriage notice in the Deniliquin Pastoral Times on the 29th of March 1879 stated, Cowley Ferguson at Deniliquin on the 25th of March, Presbyterian Church, R.H. Cowley to Marion, only surviving daughter of the late Samuel Ferguson, farmer of Leamont, Victoria. However, more tragedy fell on this family as Robert died on the 26th of December 1879, so only 9 months after their marriage, in Deniliquin from delirium tremens, aged only 40, indicating then with all the tragedy that had happened in his life that quite possibly he had turned to alcohol. Marion gave birth to a daughter, Flora Ethel Cowley, on the 9th of January 1880, barely 2 weeks after her husband died, and the baby only lived for 2 hours. So Marion had to endure the grief of her husband and now her baby daughter dying, but she continued to run the hotel. Marion then married John Hancock, a teamster, in 1882, and the licence of the hotel was transferred to John Hancock in 1883 and was then known as Hancock's Hotel. Robert and Jane Cowley's firstborn, Jane Webster Cowley, died on the 7th of January 1889 in Deniliquin, aged only 15 years old, of typhoid. However, the only surviving daughter of Robert and Jane, Rosaline, lived beyond childhood. She seems to have lived with her maternal aunt in Leamont. She never married and started a business with Emma Stevenson in 1908 when she was 33 as fruiterers. From 1920, they moved their business to their home. Emma Stevenson was listed as living with her still and working as a dressmaker. Rosaline died in 1922, aged only 47. Her personal estate was worth over £1,000. She bequeathed 1/3 to Emma Stevenson and the remaining to her Deniliquin relatives, which I'll cover later. Therefore, Robert Cowley does not have any direct descendants. John and Marion Hancock had 6 children. The firstborn was Elsie Annie May, born on the 14th of December 1883. Elsie married Thomas Peter Wilkinson in 1909 in Deniliquin when she was 26 and Thomas 33. Thomas had been born in Raglan, Victoria. They had a daughter, Jessie Margaret Rose, in 1909, who married Donald MacLeod, and they had 2 children. Elsie died on the 10th of June 1919, aged only 35, and in the Deniliquin Pastoral Times it announces her death. On Tuesday evening, the death occurred of Mrs. Wilkinson, wife of Thomas Wilkinson of North Deniliquin. The deceased lady had not been in good health for a considerable time. We join with many friends in expressing sincere sympathy to her husband and relatives in their bereavement. The second child of Marion and John Hancock's was Arthur J. H. Hancock, who was stillborn in 1886. Their third child, Mabel Florence Matilda Hancock, was born in 1888. Mabel married John Wilkinson, the brother of Thomas Wilkinson, in 1910 in Deniliquin, so sisters married brothers. John had also been born in Raglan, Victoria in 1881. They lived at 70 Davidson Street and had 2 sons, Linton Aubrey Wilkinson, a shearer, who was born on the 28th of October 1911, and Thomas Leslie in 1916. Mabel died in 1959 in Deniliquin. Their fourth child was Ernest John William Hancock, who was born in 1890. He married Rose Reed in Deniliquin in 1913. Rose's death was recorded in the Pastoral Times on the 18th of October 1938. The death occurred at Griffith on Friday last following a brief illness of Mrs. Rose Hancock, aged only 39 years, wife of Mr. Ernest Hancock, formerly of North Deniliquin. She was the eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. W. Reed of Harding Street, Deniliquin, and was a native of Deniliquin and had lived here for many years. Some years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Hancock left Deniliquin to make their home in the Merriwagga district, where Mr. Hancock acquired land. The deepest sympathy in their very sad bereavement is extended to Mr. Hancock, their 3 children, the deceased woman's parents, and sisters and brothers. A child born a week previous to Mrs. Hancock's death predeceased its mother by a few days. And Ernest died at Burrawa, New South Wales in 1950 at the age of 60. In the Coonamunra Herald on the 5th of May 1950 it outlines his death. Sudden death on a train, inquest at Murrumburra. A sad story of a man who left Sydney very ill and failed to reach home before his death was told at an inquest at Murrumburra Court. The man was Ernest William Hancock, whose dead body was taken off the train at Barden on Thursday the 18th of April. The daughter of the deceased, Miss Etty Hancock, who resided with her father at Merriwa, gave evidence at the inquest. "My father was away in Sydney about a fortnight," said Miss Hancock. "He was not well when he left. He had just had a bad attack of cardiac asthma and had been treated by Dr. Burrell. Prior to his return, he sent a telegram reading, 'Leaving Sydney sick, coming as far as I can.' He was 60 years of age, a farmer and a grazier. A friend helped him on the train." Doctor's evidence, Dr. R.D. Hegerton, deposed, "I received a call from ASM Reid on the 18th of April asking me to come to the station and examine the body of a person who collapsed on the train. There was no evidence of external injuries nor any suspicious circumstances surrounding the death. He looked a sallow, delicate man, older than his years. I concluded that he died from a heart seizure and later studied a prescription from Dr. Burrell, found amongst his papers that indicated he was being treated for asthma. I thought he was about 68 years of age." The district coroner found that the deceased had died from natural causes. Mr. S. Weaver, local traffic inspector, was present on behalf of the Railway Commissioner and expressed sympathy to the bereaved relatives. The fifth child was Jack Thomas McQueen Hancock, who was born in 1892. He married Jane Beaton in 1918 and died in 1968 in Deniliquin, aged 76. And their sixth child, George A.C. Hancock, was stillborn in Deniliquin in 1897. Marion died on the 29th of May 1914 in Deniliquin at the age of 59, and John Hancock died at the age of 83 in June 1936, and the Deniliquin Pastoral Times outlined his death. Mr. John Hancock, an old resident of North Deniliquin, died in the hospital on Saturday. He was one of the fast disappearing teamsters of the district who were pioneers in transporting wool to market from riverina stations in the early days of settlement and in carrying goods from Victoria to this district. Long after the railway was extended from Echuca to Deniliquin, he was one of the most familiar bullock drivers on the roads. With advancing years, he disposed of his plant and lived at North Deniliquin and is survived by two sons and a daughter, Ernest Hancock Hilston, John Hancock Deniliquin and Mrs. M. Wilkinson Deniliquin. So I mentioned how Rosalind Cowley bequeathed some of her estate to her Deniliquin relatives. Well, she bequeathed £50 each to the sons of Mabel Wilkinson, and Mabel herself received a third share, and the children of Elsie Wilkinson, who had died quite young, also received a third share. Another aside is that a distant relative found treasured family letters and photos that were stored in an old sea chest in North Queensland. Amongst them were photos taken by H. Moser, who was a photographer based in Deniliquin in the late 1800s, and this unearthed a photo of Robert Cowley and his two little girls. This is the only photo that I've been able to find of the family, and I will post that on my Facebook page. So quite a sad story of Robert Cowley and his family and extended family, but one that I wanted to ensure was shared. As mentioned before, he has no direct descendants of his own to pass on the story. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch.